Hey, what's up? It's the False Swipe Gaming Crew with Kellen and VKC. Today we're gonna talk about Zard being an OU in Gen 3 after more than a decade, really. Like you said, like basically like
Closer
15
to
years.
two, yeah.
Closer to two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when Gen 3 was the main gen, then fire types got kind of overlooked in general just because Rock Slide is everywhere and water types are everywhere. When Gen 3 was current, then Suicune was like a top 3 Pokemon. And it was like one of the most feared things in the tier. It was like number 1, DD Tyranitar, number 2, Calm Mind Suicune. And, the biggest fire types are Moltres and Charizard, and they're also weak to Zapdos, which is, also everywhere. And then at some point, people saw that Charizard could be threatening if you did like sub Sunny Day with Pataya, and you just have like this insanely strong Fire Blast, but it's very inconsistent. Moltres started getting used in like, let's say 2016, and then it started seriously getting used in 2017 once people realized that there were a lot of common team styles. It really ruined. Because it's really easy to put a bunch of Fire Weak Pokemon together, like Skarmory, Metagross, Celebi, Magneton, Jirachi, sometimes Heracross as well. All these Pokemon go really well together, and before in like older Advance, then it didn't really matter if you stacked up on Fire Weeks like that because there weren't any Fire types around to make you pay for it. And then Moltres, kind of warped that a little bit. And then Charizard followed on its heels. I would say, let's say 2018, 2019 is when it started really getting taken seriously as more than just that, gimmick, which can use sub Sunny Day. That's not really a consistent set. People like lefties on it so it can survive in sand. I didn't even mention Focus Punch. That was really popular on Charizard and is also a major differentiating factor between it and Moltres because it can directly threaten T-Tar and Blissey, and to a lesser extent Snorlax. And that's really big because, Moltres ruins T-Tar most of the time with Will-O-Wisp anyway, but Blissey is more of a pain, and you really need spikes to help Moltres muscle past it. Roar and spikes go a long way. But with Charizard, what really made people gravitate towards it more was you're not going to just be completely walled by Blissey with it. You can threaten, and when you threaten Blissey, then you threaten entire teams, for example. Like consider the very standard setup in Advance of Tyranitar, Skarmory, Swampert, Blissey, Gengar, and then a 6th Pokemon, which can be a lot of things. Charizard threatens all 5 of those Pokemon, which is incredibly rare in Advance. Like those 5 Pokemon are spammed so much together because they're really good at covering pretty much everything. So, and Zard threatens them more than Moltres can. Now, not to say it doesn't have its flaws, but what really pushed Zard into OU territory, and this is within like the last 2 years, is that people realize that it has Beat Up. And this is really big.
Beat Up?
Beat Up, Beat Up, which is a move you might only know from playing in-game once in a while. But yeah, Beat Up, for those who don't know, it basically attacks for each of your Pokemon that are still alive, that haven't fainted yet, and it attacks with their base attack stat. And it's a physical attack. So by and large, this does not really do a lot of damage against most Pokemon because of the way it's calculated. I won't pretend to know the specifics, but I know that if you use Beat Up against, like, let's say, even like a Dark Weak Pokemon like Celebi, then it's not really going to be hitting it that hard.
Okay.
So what you really want to be using Beat Up against is Pokemon with incredibly low base defense stats. It has nothing to do with the attack investment, just the base stats. And what rules over Advance but Blissey? Blissey has a base defense of like 10, I think. Yeah, I think Chansey is 5, Blissey is 10. Basically, Blissey takes a lot of damage from Beat Up if you are attacking with the team that's full of high base attack Pokemon. And, bear in mind, even if you have a team of special attackers like Zapdos and Celebi and Suicune, then these Pokemon have high base attack stats. Like, it doesn't seem like it because you wouldn't really physically attack with them. But, like, Suicune has a decent attack stat. So people started using Beat Up on Dugtrio because they realized, oh, well, Dugtrio, its fourth move slot is kind of malleable after Earthquake, HP Bug for Celebi, and Aerial Ace for Heracross. And you can kind of experiment with it because Rock Slide doesn't get used too much. So people started using Beat Up on it to help it deal with Blissey better because counter Blissey otherwise ruins Dugtrio trying to Earthquake it. Beat Up can't be countered because it's a Dark type move. And then people realized that you could kind of skip the Dugtrio, and with Beat Up Charizard, you have so much more flexibility in dealing with Blissey. As long as you have, 5 other Pokemon healthy, then you're hitting it for well over half its health. And basically what this does is make it so that Blissey can't switch into Charizard. And when because Focus Punch, yeah, you could say Focus Punch, it could do this before, but Focus Punch is a very high-risk move. You need a sub, or to use it on a switch, and you can't use it consecutively. Beat Up you can use at any time with no risk consecutively, and it's a lot easier. So basically, Beat Up what launched Charizard into, I would maybe say even easier to fit on a team than Moltres because it doesn't require spikes and enables different styles of team. And that made it genuinely OU, just being able to plow through Blissey like that. Now, the one thing about Beat Up is that it doesn't get calculated by the base attack stats on your team. So you can't really throw Blissey on your Beat Up Charizard team, for example, because Blissey has a base attack stat of 10 or whatever.
Yeah. So
you're doing negative damage with it basically. And every Beat Up hit counts. You're really scrounging for percents there. But if it's not Blissey tier weak, then everything hits pretty hard with Beat Up. I mean, even Charizard's attack stat isn't amazing, but alongside a bunch of other similarly strong stuff, it gets the job done. So yeah, basically Beat Up.
That's why this stuff is so interesting, because these are like the metas that we actually get to see develop over a long period of time.
Yeah, and people sometimes have the misconception that once a generation is no longer current, then it stops developing. But they still get played even after a new generation comes out, and a ton of development happens even after this is the case. And it's not really surprising because, if a metagame keeps getting played, then new things are going to be discovered. You think, oh, well, 3 years or however long is a current generation, then that's plenty of time to explore everything, but it's really not. Like, I think back to 3 years ago in Advance, and I'm not going to say it's unrecognizable because let's be reasonable. Like, T-Tar is still going to be T-Tar, Metagross is still going to be Metagross, that kind of thing. But, there's so many changes constantly happening within the last 3 years alone, to the point where I consider the last 3 years still recent as opposed to an entire generation's worth. And if you go back, you have to go back a while to get back to a really long time, in fact, to get back to anything resembling current generation Advance. And this goes for pretty much every old generation that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, thank you so much on that.
Yeah,
this has been BKC himself on why Charizard is finally OU after closer to 2 decades.